To begin with, the lantern went out. Not slowly, not with a flicker. It simply died. Inside the wooden infirmary hut, the air smelled of iodine, damp wool, and something sour beneath it all, infection that had spread too far. Boots shifted on frozen planks. Someone coughed. A metal tray clattered to the floor and rolled in a slow, echoing circle. "Doctor!" The whisper didn't finish. Outside, wind scraped against the barbed wire. Snow hissed across the yard, and somewhere beyond the fence, a guard tower door creaked open. They had done everything they could, but they couldn't save everyone. And when the sun rose the next morning, something inside the camp had changed. What happened in those hours after the last lantern went dark would ripple through the barracks for years. Because that night, it wasn't only lives that were lost. It was trust. Winter 1944. Deep inside occupied Europe, in a prisoner of war camp run under the authority of Nazi Germany, thousands of Allied soldiers were held behind timber fences and electrified wire. The camp, officially classified as a labor and holding facility, operated under strict rules dictated by the German High Command. Food was rationed. Letters were censored. Movement was counted. The camp hospital, a long wooden barrack near the northern fence, was staffed by captured Allied doctors. Under the Geneva Convention, medical personnel were allowed to treat prisoners, but supplies, those depended on what the commandant allowed. And that winter, supplies were running thin. The Red Cross parcels arrived late. Then one shipment didn't arrive at all. No one explained why. Guards avoided questions. Clerks stopped updating the infirmary ledger. A crate marked medical bandages was delivered one afternoon, but when opened, it contained nothing but paper stuffing. Someone had signed for it anyway, and no one could say who. Captain Thomas Hale had been a surgeon before the war, precise hands, calm voice, the kind of man who never rushed. In the camp, he wore the same faded coat every day, sleeves permanently rolled. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours at a time in weeks. Beside him worked Lieutenant Aaron Weiss, younger, thinner, constantly writing notes in a small leather journal he kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard. There was also Sergeant Miller, once a farm boy from Iowa, now the infirmary orderly. He boiled instruments over a coal stove that rarely stayed lit. And in the far cot, by the frost-covered window, lay Private Daniel Kessler, 19 years old, feverish, drifting in and out of awareness. Kessler wasn't the only one. By mid-January, influenza had spread through Barrack 7, then pneumonia followed, then infections from untreated frostbite. The doctors worked in silence, but they had started counting something. Not just patients. Rations, doses, days left. And someone else had started counting too. Each evening, a guard lingered longer than necessary at the infirmary door. Watching. Wise. The first sign something was wrong wasn't a death. It was a missing entry. Lieutenant Weiss noticed it while reviewing the infirmary ledger. 3 patients admitted on Tuesday, only 2 listed on Wednesday morning. No discharge note. No transfer record. He mentioned it quietly to Captain Hale. Hale said nothing. That same night, the coal stove failed again. The temperature inside dropped below freezing. Breath hovered in clouds over the cots. In the darkness, someone shuffled near the medicine cabinet. Sergeant Miller swore he heard drawers opening. But when he rose with the lantern, no one stood there. The cabinet was locked. Or at least it had been. 2 vials of sulfur powder were gone by morning. The lock wasn't broken, which meant someone had a key. But only 3 people were supposed to. The outbreak peaked on a night when the sky turned a flat, endless gray. Private Kessler stopped breathing first. Captain Hale pressed his ear to the boy's chest. Nothing. He tried again. Compressions, breath, whispered orders. Stay with me. The floorboards trembled with hurried footsteps as two more patients began convulsing. Sergeant Miller dropped a kettle. Water spread across the frozen floor. Lieutenant Weiss reached for the last vial of antibiotic. It wasn't there. For a moment, no one moved. Outside, a whistle blew. Inside, someone began praying. They worked with what they had: boiled cloth, diluted doses, hands stiff from cold. One man stabilized, another faded. The lanterns sputtered. Then darkness. When light returned, 3 cots were empty. By dawn, 5. And by sunrise, the infirmary was silent in a way it had never been before. But here was the part no one expected. The guards didn't react. No inspection. No report. No reprimand. Almost as if they already knew. Captain Hale demanded to see the camp commandant. The request was denied. Lieutenant Weiss attempted to file a formal medical shortage report. The clerk stamped it, then quietly removed it from the stack. That afternoon, 2 guards entered the infirmary unannounced. They inspected shelves, opened drawers, counted instruments. One of them paused at the medicine cabinet. Short on supplies, he asked in accented English. Hale said nothing. The guard smiled, thin, unreadable. That evening, Sergeant Miller found something beneath the coal stove. An empty sulfur vial. German issued. Different label. Which meant it hadn't come from their supply crate. Someone had taken medicine, but not for the prisoners. And that night, whispers began spreading through the barracks. Someone's trading. Someone's hiding doses. Someone's protecting certain men. But who? Over the weeks that followed, 4 explanations took hold inside the camp. The first was that the supplies had been diverted by the German administration, redirected to frontline units as the war turned against them. Records were altered to hide it. But if that were true, why were some German-labeled vials found inside the infirmary? The second was that a prisoner had stolen medicine to barter for food or protection. Yet no extra rations appeared, no one grew stronger. And no one confessed. The third was that a guard sympathetic to the prisoners had secretly slipped supplies in, but taken them back when scrutiny increased. Possible. But why remove antibiotics during the worst outbreak? The fourth was the hardest to speak aloud. That someone inside the medical staff had been forced to choose. Who receives the last dose? Who doesn't? Captain Hale never admitted to such decisions. But Lieutenant Weiss stopped writing in his journal after that night. Years later, when the camp was liberated by Allied forces, several medical logs were missing. Erased. No names listed for the 5 who died that night. Just blank lines. And a single ink blot where a signature should have been. Spring came slowly. Snow melted into mud. Barbed wire glistened in weak sunlight. The infirmary remained standing long after the war ended, its windows replaced, its stove repaired. Visitors would later walk through it quietly, reading plaques, studying faded photographs. But there is no official explanation for what happened the night the lantern went out. No confirmed theft. No recorded confession. Only absence. And the memory, passed down by survivors, that something shifted in the camp after that evening, not just morale, but faith in certainty itself. Because sometimes survival isn't about fighting an enemy outside the wire. It's about the choices made inside it. And somewhere in the dark, when the medicine cabinet clicked shut, someone made a choice. A choice that 5 men never came back from. So what do you think happened? Was it desperation? orders from above, or a silent decision made by someone who never spoke of it again? Let me know your theory in the comments. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. Because some stories fade, but others wait in the dark.